David, what kind of a kid were you? Where are you living? Who are your parents? Start at the beginning.
Okay. What kind of a kid was I? I grew up in Storrs, Connecticut, which is a small college town in
Where University
eastern
of Connecticut is?
Yeah, my dad's a math professor there.
Okay.
And I grew up, as you might imagine, I liked computers. I liked...
Well, I don't imagine. Some of the great
That's
computer
true.
scientists didn't.
Yeah.
So at what age? I mean, are you touching one as early as you can remember? Or?
More or less. When I was 7 years old, I was born in 1975, and when I was 7 years old, or 8 years old, my parents brought home a Commodore 64, and actually no, a TI-99 4A, Texas Instruments, and they attached it to the TV, and I started learning how to program. And
was it tough? Do you remember just the thrill of figuring things out?
I loved it. Yep, I loved it from the beginning. And at some point, we graduated the TI-99 4A to a Commodore 64, still attached to the TV. I kept programming it. At some point, I got a monitor. That was a big deal. Moved to my room, and the Commodore 64 was in my room, and I kept programming the Commodore 64. And yeah.
Are you the only kid in the family?
So I have a younger sister, and so there's another part of the story about how I got into computer science, which is that I had a babysitter, and my babysitter, remember this is Eastern Connecticut, his name was Ray Sidney, and he is the son of one of my dad's colleagues, Stu Sidney, and he was really into computers, and he came over and he would teach me how to program. So I really credit my interest in computer science to Ray Sidney. My sister and I, when we talk about this, joke because she was around too, and somehow he was babysitting both of us, but all I remember is Ray and I.
So this is the famous male bias?
I don't know. Ray Sidney ended up being the 8th or 9th employee at Google. And so, many years later, I was on a train, this is after college, and I was on a train in California, and I see this guy who looked just like Ray Sidney, and this is years and years later. But, computer scientists, often we don't change that much, or at least we don't change the kind of clothes we wear. I saw this guy, he's wearing a tie-dye shirt and jeans and sandals, he looked like Ray Sidney. And I went up to him and I said, Ray Sidney? And he said, Dave Blei. And, this is on the Caltrain from San Francisco to Menlo Park. And anyway, he said, this is 1998, he says, I'm working at this little startup called Google, we should come and have lunch. And so I, went to Google to have lunch with him that, the next day or a week later or something. And it was in a little office in Palo Alto. And then afterwards he said, so, do you want to join Google? It would be fun to have you here. And I said, it sounds nice, but I got into grad school, so I had gone into grad school at Berkeley by then, and I said, so I'm going to go to grad school instead.
Later on we may get to the subject of commercial choices as opposed to academic choices, because when you start making your decisions, but it's a great reference. In your family, are both your parents scientifically inclined, or is it just your father, the mathematician?
So my dad's a mathematician. My mom is a lawyer and a lobbyist. So as children, we grew up our family vacation was to go to Washington D.C. for the big NARAL march.
Right.
She lobbies for a lot of left-wing organizations for gay and lesbian rights and for pro-choice organizations and women's rights organizations.
God's work. Right.
Yep, exactly. And so anyway, Ray Sidney, I grew up liking computers. At some point, another story about my sister, she had called me up and she said, Dave, I read this cool book called What Color is Your Parachute? And it's about finding your path in life and finding what you want to really want to do. And I was maybe 30, 35 when she called me to tell me about What Color is Your Parachute. It's a famous book.
Yes, it is.
And I said, Michaela, my sister's name is Michaela, I know what color my parachute is. My parachute is computer.
And you, in a way, always knew that.
Yeah, I was lucky. I loved it from the beginning. And
also lucky in your generation, as we'll find out in terms of what's breaking in this field. Okay, so basically going to school is like a vacation from from the serious computer work at home, or are you getting any support in, well, elementary school, but let's get to high school for this kind of interest? Is it the right kind of school for you? Tell me about your education.
Sure.
Younger education.
Yeah. So in Storrs is a small town. There's now I live in New York City. We think about what school do we send the kids to, all this stuff. It wasn't like that where I grew up. You went to the school. The school bus picked you up. It took you to school, and you came home at the end of the day. My elementary school, middle school were good. They were nice places. It was a small town. In high school, I started doing a bit more. I was into math and computer science, and there was a computer team that I was on.
Okay.
I remember the computer team teacher asking us to build a sorting algorithm. And he said, okay, so go home and figure out a way to input a bunch of numbers and spit out the numbers in order. And I came up with what I now know is called destruction sort, where you go through the numbers and find the smallest number, print it, turn that number into the biggest number you can think of, which for me was, 9,999. Then you find the smallest number, print it, turn it into and so at the end of the day, you've printed the numbers in order and you've lost all the information because all those numbers are equal to 9,999.
Wow.
Anyway, so in high school, I also I played in a band, like in a goth band, and I was really into that.
So you were normal?
I played in a goth band, so you
as normal
you
as
can
that
interpret
is.
that as you like.
Are other people keeping up with you? You've been celebrated as somebody who really knows his stuff, and I won't use the G word, but you're said to be pretty smart. Was that a problem in high school? Did you have friends who were kind of at the same pace you were at, interested in the same intellectual problems, or are you just darting out ahead?
In high school, there was really, there was a group of us. We all took honors classes together and things like that, and it was a very nice high school. There wasn't a lot of competition among us, and we enjoyed ourselves. I was one of the editors of the school paper. I really enjoyed that.
So you're not bored, basically. I mean, you're getting the intellectual and social sustenance that you want at that point in life.
Absolutely, yeah. I hung out with the nerdy kids.
Okay.
Plus the goth
That's a
band.
shocker. But okay. So let's get you to college.
Yeah.
How do you decide where to go?
Yeah. So in college is where I think my interest in AI and machine learning began.
But how did you know to go where you wound up going?
Right. I went to Brown, and I'm trying to remember how I chose Brown. I loved Brown, but I can't remember why I chose it.
Are you getting counseling? I mean, by now you've demonstrated a real ability in computer science, and this is now the 90s.
I graduated high school in 1997.
Okay.
So, no, sorry, 1992. I graduated college in 97. So, this is 1992. I applied to a lot of schools, mostly on the East Coast. I got into some, I didn't get into others.
Right.
And I went and visited Brown and liked it. I liked the vibe of Brown, kind of had a sort of a countercultural spirit, which I liked.
So you could argue that the decision was, obviously it was a great university, but the decision was more cultural than scientific. Your father's in saying, go here to develop yourself to the next stage. I mean, you're just going to a place you want to go to.
More or less, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My parents liked that it was close by.
Yeah, as all parents do.
And they liked that Brown has a good reputation. And we knew some people that had gone there and liked it, and I liked those people.
So there you are. You made the decision, I'm joking, of course, for the wrong reasons.
Right.
I mean, in terms of the development of an intellectual career. But Brown turns out to be an intellectually productive place for you to be.
An amazing place, yeah. And there was a professor there that really made this happen. And her name is Leslie Kilbling. She's now at MIT. But at Brown, there were several professors, but Leslie stands out. She was my thesis advisor, and she taught the artificial intelligence class when I took it, and turned me on to this whole world of AI and machine learning that I've been a part of ever since.
Let's situate AI intellectually for this era. Okay, so you are you're in this direction, you've got the right mentor, teacher, and you're learning. What is the state of AI? What are the assumptions about it? I mean, that's a big subject, but just characterize the 90s, because your career as it takes off is going to take off during a tremendously transformative period.
Right.
So I'm interested in the before for you.
That's a good question. I'll have to think about it. What was AI like back then? Well, let me describe it, and maybe
yes, of course.
Maybe what we're looking for will come out of that description. Well, first of all, I read this book. I'm sure you know it, Gödel Escher Bach. I read my father's copy. His sister had given it to him, and that book energized me. And and to be clear, that book has very little to do with modern AI and machine learning. But it was, a meditation on cognitive science and what might be possible, and logic and intelligence. And for however old I was, 19-year-old kid, it was very, very energizing around thinking about the possibilities of computers and computers doing things that we don't think they can do. So I read Gödel Escher Bach, and I loved it. I had dreams about it. I was completely into this book. And then I took AI, and AI was taught by Leslie Cabling. And there's a great AI textbook called Artificial Intelligence: A Modern Approach. It's by Stuart Russell, who's at Berkeley, and Peter Norvig, who's at Google now. And that book has been the AI textbook for many years. And they just written it in 1995 or whenever it was that I took it.
Again, your timing in life is pretty good.
Yeah, they had just written that book, and they were friends with Leslie, and they sent her the draft copy and said, hey, can you teach out of this book and tell us what you think? So I took AI with Leslie Cabling, and that was the book we were using. We were using this book that became a classic.
Wow.
So it was fantastic. It was a fantastic book. It's all based on this agent. I remember it. It's all based on this notion of an agent, an intelligent agent, and what algorithms can the intelligent agent use to act in the world. And through that class, we learned about lots of classical AI methods, but we also learned about some more modern methods. And in particular, we learned about reinforcement learning. So I don't know if reinforcement learning has passed by these interviews yet, but the idea in reinforcement learning is very natural, is that there is an agent, an intelligent agent, and it's acting in the world, taking actions. And the agent has a catalog of actions that it can take, and what it does is it roams around taking actions, and when good things happen to that agent, it gets reward. And the agent is, while wandering around the world, trying to learn what's called a policy. And a policy is a mapping from your state, like where you are right now, to action, what you will do. And by the agent trying to learn a policy, what I mean is that the agent is trying to learn how to act to maximize its long-term reward.
Right.
Which, when you hear about this, you can't not think about just daily life.
Right.
And
you're talking about a human being.
Yeah.
Right.
So reinforcement learning is about making that whole idea mathematical, and we started learning about reinforcement learning algorithms, how to wander around, and there's all these fascinating angles, like as one example, the explore-exploit conundrum. Do I go try a new restaurant that I've never tried before, or do I go to the restaurant that I know I like and I want to have the burger there? All right, and reinforcement learning agents have to solve this problem. Do I explore new ways of acting in the hopes that they are going to lead to even bigger rewards than I currently think I can get, or do I do the tried and true behavior that is going to get me the rewards?
Here's the way I want to characterize this era, and please correct me because I'm certainly not an expert. AI at this point is aspirational. I'm saying this, you're then going to correct me.
Yeah.
It's aspirational. What you're really doing at this stage is not yet understanding how machines can do some of this. I mean, again, you can correct me, but you're trying to figure out how human beings do it. And then you're going to get to how can machines do it. Now, tell me really what's going on.
Yeah, so, well, you're accurate, except you're also still accurate. So the AI, Mike Jordan just wrote this essay, the AI, the revolution hasn't happened yet. The revolution hasn't happened yet, so we have not achieved AI. And we'll get to where I don't even think AI is possible.
You're going to contribute to at least getting us where we are now. But at this point,
yes. So things are very aspirational, and we're thinking about how people do things, but also connecting it to mathematical fields like signal processing and electrical engineering and control and statistics. And it's all kind of coming together a little bit at this time. It hasn't yet totally come together. And reinforcement learning makes mathematical the intuitive agent-based action that I just described for you, where you are wandering around, deciding what to do, hoping that you're making good decisions.
Now that you've brought in the term mathematics, let me just ask this question. Somebody with your capabilities and interests might or might not have chosen mathematics as a field rather than computer science at this point. What's the difference in terms of a life choice? Because you need mathematics to do computer science.
Yeah, that's right. So
why didn't you become a mathematician? Is that because you've been playing with machines your whole life?
I think so, yeah. I think, I wish I had a more sophisticated answer than I like it. I like programming computers.
Right.
I still like programming computers.
So there was no intellectual torment about do I go this direction or that?
Yeah, no, but like I said, my parachute was computer colored.
Right.
And I love mathematics too. So I was a double major in CS and mathematics.
You were?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's some math classes that I particularly loved. Abstract algebra comes to my mind as very computer science-y math class.
Okay, that's going to allow us to get you to graduate school because you're a double major. You've had an amazing mentor.
Yep.
Maybe by this time you figured out you could make a life's work of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's going to take graduate school.
Yep.
How do you decide about the next stage?
Right. So I took this course in AI with Leslie, and it was life-changing. And then Brown is an amazing place, and Leslie's an amazing mentor, and she folded me into her research. So she folded me into her research group. So I then used to go upstairs. This is before everyone had a laptop. There was an AI lab where all the graduate students sat and programmed and worked on their research. And so I had access to the AI lab at Brown, and I used to go up there and sit there and work on my undergraduate thesis. And that's where I met graduate students and learned what it was like to be a computer science graduate student. I loved it. After college, I went and worked at a research institute called SRI.
Oh, so you took a break from the academic?
I didn't go right to graduate school. I mean, SRI was an academic research institute. It used to stand for Stanford Research Institute, but then after Vietnam War protests, it became just an empty acronym.
Got it.
But it's a famous place for AI research. It's where Siri first started.
Really?
A lot of robotics first started there. And my mentor, Leslie, she worked there. And she helped pave the way.
Did she urge you to do that before you went on to enroll in an academic program?
I can't remember. I think I knew that I wanted to work a little bit, and I knew I wanted to move to California. I'd always had this idea that California was a great place, and turned out I was right. Yep.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So you went, and there were no risks in taking time off. I mean, just in terms of getting into the program you wanted, or you just didn't worry about that?
I didn't worry about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
It's funny. My wife and I often talk about how it's different now because I interact with undergraduates a lot in my job, and it felt like a different time. And I sound old when I say that, but I don't know if the world felt as competitive back then. When I was graduating college, I don't remember my friends who now are all very successful, happy, upstanding citizens. I don't remember us thinking about, what move should I make to get to the next place where I want to eventually be? There was very much a feeling of, hey, what do you want to do next year? And some people said, I'm going to go and I saved up some money, I'm going to travel, or I'm going to get a job at a startup, or I'm going to go to California and get a job in the tech industry. But it wasn't, it wasn't as deliberate as well. I eventually want to be an academic, so
Right, so I'm
going to
gonna
get
do
this
this.
job, and then so yes, I went to.
So
SRI.
how long are you in this California paradise for
so
research?
It was paradise. So I went to SRI, and I basically was coding in Lisp. I was writing Lisp software with researchers, people who had PhDs in AI, and at the same time, I was still communicating with Leslie over email, because we were turning my undergraduate thesis, which was about reinforcement learning, into a paper, a workshop paper that we could publish. And basically, Leslie sent me an email. I remember saying, hey, it's probably a good time to go to grad school now. And I thought about it, and I thought, I don't love having, even though I like my job, I didn't love having to come to the office every day.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted now it's an illusion, but I wanted the freedom of academic life, where I could, kind of set my own agenda and think about what I wanted to think about. And so I said, yeah, that's a good idea, and I applied to graduate school.
And in your mind, it was obviously going to be a good graduate school, but did it have to be in California?
No, I applied all over the place.
Oh, you did?
But then it boiled down to I was deciding between Berkeley and UBC, the University of British Columbia. UBC at that time had some really great reinforcement learning researchers, and that was the world that I knew back then, was reinforcement learning.
Right.
But I also got into Berkeley, and I had also met my wife, and she was in California.
Right.
And again, this is going to be how it's a different time. So at Berkeley, my advisor was Mike Jordan, and he's a very well-known and important scholar in the world of machine learning. And, before I even got into Berkeley, I emailed Mike. Leslie said, hey, Mike Jordan might be a good person to work with. He just moved to Berkeley from MIT. And so I emailed Mike, and I said, hey, I graduated from Brown, I work at SRI, I'm interested in applying to grad school, can we chat? I'd be interested in maybe working with you. Leslie Cabling suggested it. And Mike wrote back, sure, why don't you come and meet with me for 15 minutes, 30 minutes. And before you meet with me, here's a paper, why don't you read this paper that I just wrote?
He's going to test you.
It was a great thing, and now I do this when I meet with students.
Okay, well tell me.
But I'll tell you something else, which is that nowadays, Mike probably gets 1,000 such emails a day and probably can't respond to any of them. Back then, again, it was a different time for machine learning and AI. I took the BART to Berkeley and had a sit-down meeting with Mike Jordan.
So what's the short version of what the paper was about?
So the paper was called an variational inference. What is the paper? I don't remember what the title of the paper is, even though I've cited it many times, but it was a tutorial about how to do something called variational inference in the context of something called graphical models. And what's important for the context of this interview is that ended up being my field.
Wow.
Basically what I've been working on since that time for 20 years, almost 20 years.
So then you'd really better explain what this is about.
And I would love to be able to be a fly on the wall in that meeting to hear what on earth I thought of that paper back then, because there's no way I understood even part of it. I did read it, and I read it and tried to have an intelligent conversation with Mike about it. But anyway, so I met with Mike, I applied to Berkeley, I got into Berkeley.
Got in.
That's when I was offered an early job at Google, which I declined to go to Berkeley.
Again, now's the time to dwell a bit on this decision. Sure. Now we know what the decision to go to Google would have represented, at least financially.
Yeah.
But as you're thinking about it, and you're still young and fluid in your expectations in life, what did you think the choice was when you were offered the chance at Google as opposed to graduate education? Might you have gone to Google, or was that not even realistic in your ideas of what you wanted for your life?
Well, I'll tell you. So when I was graduating from college, I looked at lots of different kinds of jobs. So I looked at startup companies, I looked at SRI, and I interviewed at a bunch of places and decided to go to the Research Institute because I wanted to do research. When Ray offered to talk more with the Google folks.
Sure, of course, no guarantee.
Yeah,
but.
I don't want to misrepresent.
Yeah, no, understood.
When, I was a kid, first of all, Google looked like every other startup. That's one thing to remember. But one thing that is true is that I went back from that lunch, back to my office. I remember this too, and I fired up Google. This is in 1998. And I typed in a query, and I immediately noticed, and I think many people have had this experience, I immediately noticed that there was something different about this. It was better. And I remember I told my wife, I told my friends, and we all started kind of using Google at that point. It really had that kind of immediate feedback feeling that there was something good happening here. That said, to be honest, I didn't really take it seriously. That's not the right word to use. I didn't really seriously consider it.
Okay.
I got into grad school. I was really excited about going to Berkeley.
Right.
And I was looking forward. So why make a change?
Let's get us from the near incomprehension of the paper given you by Jordan.
Yeah.
To the going into this as a direction for your own research. So now you're in graduate school at Berkeley. You're pretty much free in the way graduate students are to map your course. So how are you making decisions intellectually on the way to your dissertation?
Yeah. It's funny, you said that we were going to talk about my life, and I now realize there is a theme here that I'm learning about. So maybe this is like a therapy session for me, which is that, I'll tell you, and then I'll tell you what the theme might be. So in grad school, I had a great time. I loved graduate school. I loved it. When we moved to New York at first, I told my wife, I miss California. And she said, you don't miss California, you miss graduate school. I loved graduate school. I liked meeting people. I liked having coffee. I liked learning. I liked Berkeley. I liked riding my bike around.
It's a good man's advice.
It was a great
Nothing wrong with that.
And so I was very happy. And I'll tell you what happened. So my work, I guess the preface is that my dissertation was about large-scale, what's called unsupervised learning on text data and images. And what unsupervised learning means is that, in some machine learning problems, let's contrast it with supervised learning. In some machine learning problems, the goal is, a good example is your spam filter. The goal is to say, okay, I'm a machine learning algorithm, I'm going to ingest email, and I'm going to decide if it's spam or if it's a real email.
Right.
And if it's a real email, I'll send it to your inbox. If it's spam, I'll send it to the spam folder. Okay, that's called classification. And it's called supervised learning because you need labeled data, a bunch of emails, and whether or not they're spam or not spam, in order to create the machine-learned algorithm that can decide whether or not the email is spam or not spam. That's called supervised learning. It's the algorithm that takes in labeled data and learns a rule to take your email and put it in the right bin.
Right, like a recipe or something.
Exactly. Yeah, well, or it can be statistical, but the point is that it takes in labeled data and then it does something with unlabeled data later. Now, unsupervised learning is literally unsupervised. There's no labeled data anywhere in the picture. Okay? So unsupervised learning, and this is the problem I worked on in my dissertation, is, somebody hands you 100,000 or 1 million articles, say in the New York Times. The New York Times calls you up and says, hey, we have all our articles digitized, here's 1 million articles. We want to build a way to navigate around them. We want to build a way to understand them and to help people explore them. Unsupervised learning says, okay, I'm going to ingest all that data and I'm going to find patterns in the data automatically, and then I'm going to use those patterns that I found to create something like a navigator.
And is the I at the moment the machine? Or is the I the
who is the I? It's the machine. Yeah, I the machine. I'm going to ingest this data, learn the patterns, and then build a way to navigate through this data using those patterns. And so my thesis was about unsupervised learning of text, and this is called topic modeling, where you ingest many documents, articles, whatever they are. You learn automatically the themes that pervade these documents, and then you use those themes to build a navigator or a predictor or a recommendation engine or something and the point is that you never needed anybody to label any documents. You learn this automatically. So
is anybody else working on this problem at this time?
Many people.
Many
yeah.
people.
Oh, at this time in graduate school?
Yeah.
Oh, no, few people. Yeah.
Few people.
Yeah. Unsupervised learning is a thing, but specifically with documents, I feel like we carved that out, though there were others for sure.
No, I understand it's not entirely, but not so many.
Yeah, that's right. It was one of these threads of machine learning research, and it came out of cognitive science really with the work of people like Sue Dumais on latent semantic analysis, and Thomas Hoffman. But,
allowing for modesty, I want you to tell me whether we can say that this kind of focus is what has turned artificial intelligence into a more likely medium. I mean, this feels like a real turn in the path.
Well, I will say that, something you've brought up a few times is the sort of, not right place, right time, but the timing of this is very interesting, that this was the time before the time now when technology is permeating our entire lifestyle.
Okay.
And something that's happening now is that there is a newfound importance to unsupervised learning. So in the 90s, there loosely, I don't like these labels and boundaries, but they're helpful for understanding the landscape of a field. There's supervised learning, where we have labeled data and we want to predict the labels on new data, spam filtering. There's unsupervised learning, which I just described, and then there's reinforcement learning, which is what I described earlier.
Right.
And back in the 90s, supervised learning was the main activity of machine learning, and it was also where many of the main applications of machine learning were coming. So spam filters, that emerged in the 90s and 2000s, and that's a supervised learning problem. What's happening now is a lot of the benefit of unsupervised learning and reinforcement learning, but let's not talk about that yet, or maybe we won't get to it, but unsupervised learning where, suddenly we've built measurement devices on the whole world, and so that gives us lots and lots of unlabeled data where nobody's marked it as spam or not spam, and we need to do something with that data. We want to use it to help our lives. And so how do we do that? Well, we do that by extracting patterns in that data and then using those patterns to form downstream predictions. So for example, recommendation systems, the systems that predict movies for you, these use unsupervised learning almost entirely. Now back then, unsupervised learning was arguably less important than supervised learning.
Is another thing that's about to happen, as you say, right time, right place, but let me start with, is the term big data being used yet?
No.
No.
Not at
because
all.
It's because big data comes in that unsupervised becomes so important.
Yes, that's exactly right. It's this massive amounts of data that has no labels, and there's so much of it that we can't even hope to hire enough people to label that
data. There you
go. Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting is that what's happening now, so this now has transformed the world of technology. It's clear. I think what's happening next is science, where it's not just that we build Facebook and we build Google and that gives us lots of unlabeled data, but scientists suddenly can sequence millions and millions of people, and astronomers and astrophysicists can point incredible measurement devices at the sky and collect terabytes and terabytes of data about the light and the various
unimaginable
observations in the sky. Yes. And just as lurking in the unlabeled data that we get by building things like Netflix and Google and Facebook, just by using unsupervised learning on that kind of data can help us build algorithms that form predictions that help us do whatever it is we're doing now with technology. Those scientific data sets, those hold inside them the answers to scientific questions. Now, you need a different type of computer science to get those answers out of that kind of unsupervised learning, and that's something I'm interested in right now. But anyway, yes, in short, unsupervised learning, very important now, will be important in the future, and back then wasn't as important. So how did I get into it?
Right.
I took a class with someone named Marty Hurst, a great professor, who taught a class called text data mining. Okay, and this class was about unsupervised learning and text, or really it was about text. What if we have digitized text, we have machine readable text, what can we do with it?
Right.
And again, this is the theme I was referring to. I just liked it. I don't know what to say. I enjoyed writing algorithms that operated on text. I enjoyed thinking about text as data. I enjoyed finding patterns in the text. And something I liked about it, in particular, is that, you know, as a kind of intelligent, educated person, I could take a big collection of documents and immediately see if my algorithm was doing something sensible with them because I speak the language.
Yes.
And in contrast, if I was trying to work on something like computational biology or physics, which these are very important, interesting problems, you know, I could ingest a big database of genetic data, but I wouldn't know if what I got out of the algorithm made sense unless I called up an expert biologist and said, hey, does this make sense? So now I do that kind of thing. But back then, so I loved that I could have all this data on my laptop. That's the other thing. Text data is small, and it can fit on a hard drive in 1999. And so I could have all this data on my laptop, and I could just start exploring. And I had a tight loop between making changes to algorithms and seeing what those changes would do, and there wasn't a lot of overhead, and that put me in a cycle that I really enjoyed of developing algorithms, seeing what they were doing, seeing how they worked, and so that's how I got into unsupervised learning. Marty Hurst's class. I went back to Mike. I said, hey, I'm interested in text and unsupervised learning. Mike said, oh, me too, and we started working together.
So I'm just assuming your dissertation was well received, and now you've got some career choices to make again in terms of where you're going to go. I assume you're committed to an academic career. So how are you going to? What are you going to do with your PhD?
Good. I know you're trying to take us forward. I want to say one more thing about graduate school.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's something else about grad school, and it's an important part of the story for me anyway.
Yes.
Which is this. You know, in graduate school, something I was so fortunate about was the cohort of graduate students that was in Mike's group. And the late 90s in Mike Jordan's lab was a very special time. You know, the people that I was in grad school with were people like Francis Bach and Andrew Ng and Barbara Engelhardt and Eric Jing and Long Nguyen. These were, and there's a list of us, you know, there's maybe 9 or 10 of us, and we became close, we bonded, and we became close as friends, but also close as scholars and as, you know, as intellectuals, and made a huge difference. John McAuliffe was, you know, one of my closest friends from that time and still is, and we wrote papers together, we read papers together, and I think it partly had to do with Mike and his good job of social engineering, getting us to be in a room together, reading the same papers, discussing ideas together. And it partly had to do with luck, just a group of people that got along well, but it was very special, and it created an atmosphere that is hard to recreate.
Is there any alternative to that, in fact? I mean, you had the luck of the right group and the right mentor and so forth, but can you do any work now in isolation?
Yeah, no, I don't think you can. Yeah.
So that's changing too.
That's changed, and though from that time, something I still take with me is that I still prefer in-person collaborations very strongly. You know, John McAuliffe and I wrote a bunch of papers together, and what we would do is, you know, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd ride my bike over to his house, we'd go to the coffee shop, we'd drink very strong coffee, and work on research together. It was fun. We laughed a lot. We you know, it was a social event, but an intellectual event too. And that's hard to recreate over Skype and video conferencing and things like that, I find, personally.
Well, if a computer guy says that, then it must be true.
Anyway, so one of those people I mentioned is Andrew Ng. He's now become a rock star.
Yeah, a legend.
Yes, he's a legend. And so my thesis, you know, was about unsupervised learning on text, and in particular, you know, one of the chapters in the thesis develops a model called latent Dirichlet allocation, which became a very popular model for analyzing text, for finding these themes that pervade the collection. And you know, I think how that model came about, which was such an important part of the thesis, tells the story of that time in machine learning, which is that, you know, so I was in Mike's group, Andrew Ng was there, he was a senior student, he was my TA in Mike's class, and at some point I had gone on an internship to Boston and worked on something called the aspect model, which was a a precursor to this latent Dirichlet allocation model. I worked with someone there named Pedro Moreno. And, I got into it. I worked on it. I got into working on these topic models there. I came back to Berkeley, and Andrew Ng said, hey, do you want to get some coffee? And, at some point, I realized that all we did at Berkeley was have coffee with each other. It was a huge, I realized it's come up a few times, and it's true. It happened all the time. Anyway, so Andrew Ng said, hey, you want to get some coffee? I said, sure. So we sat down at the coffee shop, Brewed Awakening, and Andrew said, what did you work on over the summer? I'm curious. I said, I worked on the aspect model. And then I explained it. And Andrew said to me, something's always bothered me about the aspect model. And he then, and I know this sounds like a myth, because stories like this happen in computer science all the time, but this is really true. He took out a napkin and he drew a picture on the napkin, which became a figure in my thesis, not his actual drawing, but the same figure,
of course.
And explained to me the problem that he saw with the aspect model and how he wanted to fix it. And that idea spawned what then later became this, it sounds immodest, but it's true, this important model in the world of unsupervised learning. And part of why it's important is because we kind of did this thing before all the data happened, but part of why it's important is that it's just a good idea. So that's how it started. So Andrew, the senior student, and me and Mike, we started working together on this, and that grew into this field.
Not because I'm determined to get you on, but because I'm really interested in this cohort idea. When you decide on academic positions that you're now qualified for, do you decide it in terms of with your cohort? Do you say, I'd like to work with you at the next stage at Princeton, and you both go for that kind of lab, or what happens in this?
Right. Well, we're all scattered now.
Okay.
But we get together every year at the conference that we started going to when we were in graduate school.
So the cohort continues.
Oh yeah. So there's this conference called the NIPS conference, and we rent a house at the NIPS conference, and we all stay together. I room with the other people there, and this has been happening since 2000, no, we've remained close.
So what is it going to take for me to get you to Princeton?
Good, I will go there. You can tell I love grad school. I would happily
live
there. Yeah. So, okay. At first, I went to Carnegie Mellon. After graduate school, Mike Jordan invited me to his office and said, "Dave, isn't your girlfriend tired of dating a good-for-nothing graduate student?" And that was his way of saying it's time to graduate.
Right.
And Mike knows my wife, who was my girlfriend, then, and so it's all.
And he knows you.
Yes. And so he knew I was very happy, and clearly wasn't going to just leave. Anyway, so I said, it was. I was there for 5 years, and so I said, okay, well, Tony, my girlfriend, she's going to law school in Michigan, so I'm going to get a postdoc. Mike always recommends his students get postdocs. There are a couple exceptions. Andrew Ng was one of them. And Mike said, that's no problem. Draw a 5-hour radius around Ann Arbor, and that's where you can get a postdoc. And it seemed like he had just thought of that then, but in retrospect, I realized, that contained 2 major hubs for machine learning, right? Toronto and Pittsburgh. And so now it seems like it was maybe possibly a little bit more deliberate than it seemed at the time. But what did I know?
Very good mentor.
Yeah. And Mike, and he remains a good mentor. One of the students, Alice Zhang, in that same cohort, said that what we get when we work with Mike is Jordan care, like Apple care, where you can call him up. I still talk to him when I would like advice or just to talk to him. Anyway.
So it winds up being Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah, so it winds up being Carnegie Mellon, where I worked with John Lafferty, who's now at Yale, and I love my postdoc too. What can I tell you?
What about the nutrition, the intellectual nutrition of the kind of work that they were doing? I mean, do you, by this point in the development of computer theory, have many options? Are serious computer labs happening everywhere?
Right. So now things are starting to heat up a little bit for machine learning. A little bit. This is 2003 that I went there. 2004.
Okay.
I can't remember, but. It's 2004-ish, and Carnegie Mellon's, of course, a central place for computer science and for machine learning, and they have a department of machine learning, and that's where I was.
Really?
It wasn't called that then. It was called Center for Automated Learning and Discovery, but it's since turned into the Department of Machine Learning. And at Carnegie Mellon, it was an amazing experience. First of all, I loved Pittsburgh. I think it's a really great city. And when you're renting apartments in Berkeley, and then you get to go to Pittsburgh to rent an apartment for the same, it's amazing. I lived in a palace. People came over. They're like, "Why do you have such a huge place?" And I just said, because I can. It's the same rent. But anyway, it was, in retrospect, I should have had a smaller place. But it was a central place for machine learning, and I worked with John Lafferty, and that's where we started working on text analysis on scientific articles. And these were OCR articles from the journal Science. And we did 2 pieces of work there that I'm very proud of. One's called correlated topic models, and one's called dynamic topic models. And they're about how to identify structural changes in these topics, especially dynamic topic models, is about how to identify automatically topics that pervade a collection that drift. So for example, a topic like scientific apparatus is one topic we found when we analyzed that data set. We could find how it drifted from words like tube and wire and battery all the way to words like silicon and technology. I use this example all the time when I talk about topic modeling. So that was work I did as a postdoc with John Lafferty. There I worked more just with him or on my own. It wasn't as big a group, but I like that. I like that change. And then the other thing that happened in Carnegie Mellon is that I got deeper into statistics. I had already gotten into statistics at Berkeley because Mike is both in the stat department and the CS department. I took a lot of statistics classes. But then in Carnegie Mellon, I started working with people like Steve Feinberg and getting to know people like Larry Wasserman and Chris Genovese. These are statisticians who are in the Carnegie Mellon statistics department, which is a great department. And just started reading more and getting deeper into statistical thinking.
So can I get you to Princeton now?
Yes, now I can go to Princeton. Then I applied to jobs, got a job at Princeton, visited Princeton, loved it.
Is it Princeton you loved, or the kind of computer capabilities that it had? I mean, again, I'm very interested, combination of a life choice and also an intellectual choice.
Yep.
What did Princeton offer you? I mean, circumstantially.
Right, so again, it's this theme. I applied all over the place. So now we have to talk a little bit about, we don't have to, but there's a personal angle to this story too.
Okay.
Which is that, so I mentioned my mom is a left-wing lobbyist and lawyer, and my wife is a left-wing lawyer, government lawyer as well. And she was in law school in Michigan, and she wanted to go into public service afterwards and do government law. And what that meant was that there were a few places where opportunities were good for her. Yeah, where we could both be happy. Thank you. And namely, they were big cities. Okay, so big cities, and also we like big cities. You might tell from our apartment here in New York. So I didn't restrict my search that much, but I only looked at places in big cities, and I had a bunch of interviews. And I applied to Princeton because it's a great school. It's not in a big city, but they had an opportunity for machine learning, and it's a top department. It seemed too good to pass up. Then when I went to visit Princeton, I learned that people can live in New York and commute to Princeton.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, that's cool. So this is actually a realistic option for us. So that's one aspect of Princeton. I also and this goes back to the theme that I just kind of did what I like to do. I just had a good feeling. I don't know what to say.
You trust your gut.
Yeah, I trust my gut. I went there. I liked everybody I met. I enjoyed being in the town. My talk went well. I got a good response. They only had one other person who did machine learning at that time, Rob Shapiri.
Only one other?
Yep, that's right.
And that's not a disadvantage, or is it an advantage?
Well, it can be either. He does a completely different flavor of machine learning than I do, so we complement each other. And that can be important when you're going to start a faculty job. And so what was I excited about? I liked the people I met. I liked the university. They made me a nice offer. I liked the chance to help define machine learning at a place like Princeton, which is such a great university.
Yes.
That excited me. And
because we don't have a lot more time, I want to, again, take the measure of the field now. So now you're a professor, and I guess an associate
assistant professor.
Assistant professor.
It's 2006.
Yes. So where is AI? Are we at deep learning yet?
No, we're not yet at deep learning, but we are. But again, I think this slow boil is continuing, where there's more data. I started working on doing things like scaling up my algorithm from my dissertation to larger data sets, which was a big part of my time at Princeton. I also at Princeton started, well, two things happened. I started reaching out to scientists to understand what kinds of data problems they had, but also scientists started reaching out to me. So that was a change. And
because of your papers, I mean, you're beginning to circulate your ideas.
Yeah, but also the need for machine learning. That this is to your question of where we are in the sort of broader field. That is starting to happen. So I'm sitting there in my office and I'm starting to get emails. Hi, I'm Ken Norman. I'm a neuroscientist. I have all this data. Hi, I'm a biologist. I have all this data, and of course I would go out to coffee. This is again a theme, and learn about all these fascinating problems, and learn that we didn't have the machine learning tools. So that's in Princeton is when I started, which has become my MO of finding interesting scholars who have interesting data sets, who have problems that they want to answer with those data sets that the existing machine learning tools can't help them with, and then trying to build out of that a research agenda that both pushes machine learning and helps solve a real problem in science.
Well, you're pushed by the problems.
Yes. Yep. And
people bring you interesting problems. Do you go out and seek interesting problems?
Both happens. But at this point, often people come to me and then I have coffee with them. Nowadays, what I do is I bring them to my lab meeting. We have a section of my lab meeting which is called Interesting People and Their Problems. And we learn about their problems. And then the idea is that hopefully something sparks where a student or a postdoc and me think, oh, we could do some interesting machine learning research and solve this problem. Now it can go south. It can't go south, but it can. Sometimes the problem is interesting, but the solution doesn't push machine learning forward enough that makes it worth our while. It's unfortunate, but that can happen. But often there's this nice synergistic relationship between us and the scholars, and so that is what I started doing at Princeton and really have been doing ever since. And so, I still work a lot on text analysis. I still work a lot on core machine learning algorithms and methodology. And I like to work on developing new machine learning methods to solve specific problems in the sciences.
That's a great last word, although we haven't actually gotten you to Columbia, but it's along this line of inquiry. The last question I want to ask you is the inevitable ethical one. Now that you're dealing with machines that are capable of incredible things, and you've thought about this a lot, so I know this isn't coming from left field. What frightens you about the stage we are at, artificial intelligence? I mean, a lot exhilarates you, of course.
Right.
What frightens you?
Okay, that's a good question. It's true, I expected that question. Well, first of all, you now have talked to many computer scientists. You know that we are very optimistic. And as an example, like when I was first doing work with Leslie cabling and in reinforcement learning, that you'd want to build a robot to do something, and the example was always, we want to build a robot to deliver a bagel to Leslie. And that's like, of course, all the computer scientists are sitting around saying we're building bagel delivering robots. When the NSA or the CIA is thinking, it's not going to be a bagel, or it'll be a poison bagel. Right. But so the computer scientists are optimistic in general as people, and sometimes maybe a little naive. So with that in mind, where are the risks and what are the ethical issues? So I think there are some real ones, but let me begin by saying what they are not. So I don't think that some kind of super intelligence is going to happen anytime soon, period. And I wouldn't sit around, except that at night I like to read science fiction novels. I'm happy to contemplate that when I'm reading science fiction novels. But in general, I don't think this is something to spend a lot of thought on. However, in those years that we've been discussing, which were very happy years in graduate school especially, the world changed in that we connected all the computers. We all hold computers. We started sharing data. We started relying on technology and algorithms to help make decisions for us. And that has consequences, real consequences. They are societal consequences. They can be economic consequences. And computer scientists need to think with policymakers, I believe, about the emergent properties of deploying algorithms at this scale.
Exactly.
And deploying learning algorithms at this scale. When the algorithm, so it's one thing to analyze, if I have an algorithm that's sitting in a black box that I can deploy, I can think about what it's going to do. I can run the simulation on my computer.
Right.
But if that algorithm is actually ingesting data from the world that I cannot predict what that data is going to look like, because that's like the whole point, is to use the data to make the thing that does the good stuff, then how do I think about it? How do I understand? And the example I like is that if we take all the previous loan officers' decisions and use it to build a machine learning algorithm that can give or deny you a loan, and all the previous loan officers are racist, then we're going to build a racist machine learning algorithm. Okay, so how do we, and computer science is now starting to address this, thinking about fairness and transparency in machine learning algorithms, or in algorithms in general. But I think this is a very important ethical question to answer. Both, how do we set up the norms and how do we quantify the norms that we desire as a society? And that's already fascinating and new. Like, I can't, lawyers, and like I said, my wife's a lawyer. Lawyers like to set up rules and set up criteria, but now we need those criteria to be quantifiable and measurable with data. So that's already a challenge. But then, so what are they? How do we build algorithms that respect them? These are interesting, open, ethical problems that surround that we have deployed algorithms across the whole world.
I would ask you to end with another one of those dilemmas. It's all related, which is, of course, the private and the public, and what we need to know about the private in order to make advances in the public, and what that danger is.
Right. So this is a problem I'm starting to work on, which I think is a very interesting problem. So machine learning algorithms ingest data, form predictions, we all benefit. We get to watch the movies that we want to watch on Netflix, we get to buy the things we want to buy on Amazon, we get to see the search results we want to see on Google. But then, lately we've all woken up. Oh wow, I'm telling all these faceless organizations all kinds of information about myself. Do I really want to do this?
Right.
And the machine learning challenge then is, can we build tools that give us benefits like recommendation systems and search queries and so on? Can we build tools that give us benefits without violating that private information? And then, Netflix is fine and good, but what about some even more impactful problems like, can I build better medicine?
Right.
Can I make better treatment decisions based on
knowing
the data?
Based on knowing the most intimate things about individual human beings.
And the answer has to be yes. So I believe that in the treasure trove of electronic health records, there are many secrets about the effects of drugs and the effective treatments, both for personalized medicine and for global medicine. And but we don't know how to unlock them, one, and two, the privacy issues are real there, right? But they're real everywhere, but there are protections in place that prevent us from doing the kinds of things we might want to do. And the answer is not to remove those protections. They're there for a good reason. The answer is to think about how to build machine learning algorithms that still preserve privacy. And I think these are very important issues.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.